Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to our second quarterly Healys hotel industry breakfast briefing. Glad you could brave the cold this morning and get out of your cozy beds to be able to join us. I think we have a really interesting session today and a very topical discussion on management contracts and leases as a way of doing business for hotels. First off, I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm David Schollenberger. I'm the head of the hotel and gaming team at Healys. Healys is a full-service firm offering the full range of services to the hotel industry. Martin John, seated at the back, heads our corporate services department. Savio DaCosta in the back also heads our property team. And we have employments and all the services relevant to the hotel industry. I'd like to introduce our moderator of the panel, Catherine Doggerel from Hotel Analyst Magazine, also the host of our last one. Max Thorne, who's the managing director of JLL Hospitality and Leisure. Jason Wishoff, the VP of Development for Dream Hotel Group. Philip Glassman, Development Director for IHG, and Philip Rogers, Senior Manager at KPMG. So the format is that Catherine will put discussion topics to the panel, and the various panel members will respond. We want it to be an interactive session. With the size of group, it lends itself to question and answer. So although we will have a Q&A at the end, if you have a question anytime during the presentation or a comment you'd like to make, just raise your hand and we'd like to include you. So I hope you enjoy it today.
Yes, I'd like to second all of that. Do pile in whenever you feel the urge, or I will just pick on you all relentlessly. It seems that whenever I stand in front of you, we're about 4 weeks either away from or behind an election. So I'd like to thank you all for turning up today and taking time out from voting, as I'm sure you're missing several critical ballots as we speak. Since the popularisation of sale and leaseback, the hotel sector has seen rapid expansion in the branded sector as investors flooded in, and the flags have given them the reassurance that they have sought in this new and unexpected asset class. But as shareholders have been pressuring operators to deliver larger and larger pipelines, are franchisees the new flavour of the month? What does this mean for leases and management contracts? So I'm going to kick off, because Philip's looking at me directly, which is his mistake, as the rest of the panel will learn. How are you seeing management contracts at the moment at IHG, or is it franchise all the way?
Well, I think the IHG winning model, which is our asset-light strategy, involves going through the franchise and the management route. Depending on where you are in the world, depends on where you sign more of them. And these tend to be more franchise focused in the more mature markets like the Americas and Europe, and more management contracts in the more emerging markets like sort of India, China, Russia. However, saying that, we have actually signed more management contracts year on year in Europe the last 3 or 4 years, and we're also seeing some great growth in terms of the partners the new partners that we're working with growing a lot more, and business is generally very good on the growth side, and again, testament to the IHG winning model of being brand-hearted and growing through the asset-light strategy.
So why have you seen more management contracts?
I think that depends on the classification of the hotel as well. I think we like to manage the more luxury and upscale products, so the big Intercontinentals, the Crown Plazas, Hotel Indigos. I think with the economy picking up a lot more and the great growth that we've seen in the emerging Eastern Europe, we're seeing a lot of new intercontinental projects being signed. Places like Ljubljana, Slovenia, for example, is one where we're going in with our managed offerings, keeping back in the more mature Western European markets. Again, they're mostly franchised, but we cover a wide patch in Europe, despite being a small place when you compare it to China and Russia and India. But we are seeing quite a diverse set of investors, and our management is proving strong in Eastern Europe.
Which are the type of investors who would favour a management contract?
Which the type of investors? So it really is a mixture. Really, I mean, we've signed a Kimpton hotel in Paris with AXA, so big fund. We've signed Intercontinental Ljubljana, I mentioned, with the high net worth individuals. So it really there's a mixture of all different classes of investor who want to go for management contracts, and we're only too pleased to manage the hotels for them.
And leases? Any appetite for that?
No.
Well placed on this panel, and I thank you for turning up this morning. Jason.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, so I mean, obviously we're not as big as the big operators that are probably standing around me. Much smaller in our own sense that we're very much an upscale lifestyle brand. So we are heavily concentrated around the food and beverage. So a room is a room. We know how to yield that. I think every hotelier knows how to yield rooms these days. But the one area that we are very good at is generating revenue from the food and beverage space, and using dead space to generate revenue and creating new spaces. So for us, we're quite unique in the sense that we would not look to franchise because it's not the model that we operate. So we typically look at management contracts, and those management contracts we would work as a new brand. We have to work with owners, investors, on a sense of that we either have to go in on JV purposes because obviously we're such a new brand, or we'll look at key money elements.
How often do you have to do that?
Not very often. I mean, we're still fairly new. I mean, we've only been 6 months on this side of the pond, so gaining some traction fairly quickly with the investor appetite that wants to take that risk, looking at the new generation type of hotels, where there's a lot of activity and where they see the footfall that they need to captivate the local market, and that's what we tend to do very well. So those individuals, when they come in on board to us, they are looking for something a little bit different. Yeah.
Okay, I'd just like to go back and divert a little bit, because I mentioned F&B, because I noticed that you are the only person who has an F&B element on there in front of them. So how do you drive F&B? Because it's something of a mystery to most hotel operators.
No, absolutely. I mean, the founding partner background is restaurants. So that's where he started his business. And he built up an empire, and it was mostly Indian cuisine, across from India to Ethiopia, across to Canada, and then down to New York. And as anyone in F&B then tends to go to hotels because obviously they make a lot of money. That's what he did, and he bought a lot of estate around Times Square in the time when the market was suppressed. So obviously he could buy a lot of the assets, fairly cheap prices, and he built his brands throughout that notion. And with that, he then realised that the market was slightly changing, and he decided to partner up with new entrepreneurs that were creating F&B locally in New York to drive them to bring that community back into the hotel just the same, and build the hotel space on top with the F&B down below. But the other thing where they tend to push the barriers is traditionally hoteliers, when they put a restaurant into a hotel, they typically like to have one entrance only. So one entrance, public areas, into a restaurant. We can go for separate areas. We can actually go for a complete separate building, but actually it's tied into a hotel with a walkway. So these are the sort of things that we tend to look, which is very much outside the box from the traditional operators.
Having a door.
Yeah. We like to push
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, just to add to what Jason's saying, obviously when IHG bought the Kimpton brand in the US, the official name is Kimpton Hotels and Restaurants. So we actually operate a lot of standalone restaurants as well as restaurants in hotels. But the operating model for Kimpton, which we've now launched in Europe with the imminent opening of Amsterdam later this year or very soon, is we actually employ a general manager for the hotel, and we have a separate general manager for the restaurant who doesn't report into the general manager of the hotel. So we do treat them as standalone businesses. So there's a big focus on the restaurant and bar element for the luxury lifestyle brands like Kimpton, and also through the Holiday and Open Lobby rollout, which we've got commitment from most of our European hotels now to install before the deadline. We've seen massive uptake in food and beverage in the Holiday Inn estate, where we've partnered with Starbucks to offer the license to serve Starbucks in the hotels, and we're seeing massive increases in making more of a retail theme and look and feel in the hotel. So instead of going out for coffee, a lot of people stay in, and then non-residents also come in to the hotel for coffee. So there's a big emphasis on realising that hotels are not just a rooms business, and IHG certainly is making great progress, and taking great strides in supporting our owners, growing their revenues on the non-room side of the business as well.
Why would you
sorry.
Why would you partner with Starbucks and not try and build a brand on your own?
I think it's a very crowded market, the coffee shop market. Starbucks is a great brand, and I personally am a tea drinker, so I'm not an expert on coffee. but what I do realise is, everybody drinks coffee. From the guy. We talk about different classifications of hotel, different classifications of people. Starbucks is a brand that brings everybody together, and everybody will stand in the queue for a Starbucks, whether you're in a pinstripe suit or in a tracksuit.
I tend to disagree.
That's why they live next to me.
Yeah, but with us, we look for the hipsters. We look for the local community. We look for the stuff that's new out there. We're not interested in like the Starbucks coming into our hotels. Yeah, they're big, that's fine. But that's the traditional standardised stuff that everybody's seen at every corner in every city of the world. But we want to try something slightly different.
So do you then brand what you have? Could you extend your coffee brand out to be just a coffee brand?
No. So it has to
For
be.
why?
It has to be with our brand.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's two different models to that. One is that we partner with a number of individuals that form the F&B element that we can create and bring into that hotel, into that space, into that local market. But if not, we look at the local community and we say, who are the guys that are out there that are doing really well, that are captivating the market, that are building a community that we need to drive into a hotel. And if that fits with our model, positioning-wise, we'll bring them in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how difficult is that to sell to owners?
Untested
opportunities.
We tend to go for hence why obviously we haven't touched the subject of management contracts. So
We'll get to that in a bit. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it's fine. But we tend to have there's two dividing laps with the management contracts. One is managing the hotel operations, but also the F&B, where we tend to go through a lot of the detail on the F&B with the owners to realise that it's just not your standard F&E cost that goes into a room, that you can just add a little bit more to the F&B and an FF&E into an F&B. There is a lot more that comes out of that from a if you're forecasting any P&Ls, that you have to there's a big proportion that you have to put a proportion to that to the F&B. So we have to educate the owners to understand how that model works. Yeah.
Right. So we're back to leases. Max, leases much more popular in the alternative sphere, would you say?
In the service apartment sector, I mean the operators have for a couple of decades been equity starved to a degree, so they've had to become very efficient in a lease model, and it's a very aggressive market today. I think particularly with alternatives in apart hotel service apartments, you call them what you want, but they're rooms with 4 spaces, living, bedroom, kitchen and bathroom. I think we're beginning to see an acceptance that actually it's very similar to a hotel model, and that will open up opportunities for management agreements. That being said, I think generally in hospitality, I think
Does there need to be a brand for that, or
in the hotel service apartments, or
yes,
yeah, and there are. I mean, there are 4 or 5 international brands that sit across the globe. There's a very, very strong domestic SME brand across the UK, and then we've got regional, international, European, America. I mean, there's multiple service apartments, extended stay brands. The typical model, which was born out of an extended stay guest staying for 3-6 months, those operators are now optimising yield management, and they absolutely are now competing in the hotel space. I do think generally across hospitality, with the emergence of new brands, the competitive landscape, I think operational models are at a management level. I think with the likely change in skill and staffing with taxes will make those managements become vulnerable as far as forecasting and costing. And I think with the uplift of some of the new brands that are coming into the market now, it's likely to see a more competitive lease management environment over the next couple of years.
David, Would you agree that you've seen a shift towards management contracts and away from leases?
Absolutely, and there's a number of reasons for that. Historically, leases have really only been used as an alternative to management contracts in Europe, in the U.S. and Asia. They've rarely been used, and the popularity in Europe is now, and in the UK is diminishing. Hilton has been one of the brands, and Accor, I believe, historically have been two of the brands that have favored leases. But although the lease provides greater operational control for the operator, it also imposes greater risk. It really is taking on all the risk of the downside by the operator. There's a number of types of leases. There's fixed rent leases. There's variable leases where a share of hotel revenue is given to the owner, and NOI leases where a share of profitability is given to the owner, and a hybrid type of lease which is common with companies like Hilton, where there's a minimum guarantee of rent in addition to the variable portion. The problem with leases are not only this taking on of the financial risk by the operator, but also it requires taking on of all employees by the operator as well. In a hotel management contract, typically the operator will take only key employees, if any employees at all. So there's all the risk of the employment liabilities and costs. And Phil from KPMG will go into the problems with the way leases are now treated for accounting purposes, having to put it on the books of the hotel, which, if you're a publicly traded company, will affect your share price. And that's what
Nick, do tell.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody's looking forward to the new leasing standard, but maybe that's a good reason to be moving away from leases other than just the commercial side of things. But maybe if I just give a brief overview of what the changes are and just how it will affect lessees in particular. So IFRS 16 is a new standard which will come in. There's an equivalent US standard as well. That will come in 2019, so it's a little way away, but fundamentally it means that all operating leases at the moment, so if you're leasing a property for 10 or 20 years, that will come on to your balance sheet as an asset, and you will record the liability for your payments that you'll make to the landlord. So that's a pretty fundamental change, going from just having annual payments, operating lease payments going through your accounts, into bringing the asset onto your balance sheet. And it makes some changes to the actual timing of payments as well, because if you brought on a loan onto your balance sheet, you're bringing on the interest, and interest is always front-loaded. You have more interest payments at the beginning of a loan. So that will change the P&L profile of these leases, and may well impact other things. So I was listening as you were talking about the variable lease payments. So that would be quite interesting, because those variable lease payments may not come onto your balance sheet. They're excluded to a certain extent from the balances that you might bring onto the balance sheet. So you may see commercial negotiations favouring those sort of variable terms.
So what you're suggesting there is that perhaps as a result of that change, that you might see more hybrid leases as a kind of a backdoor almost?
I think so, but I think it's always going to be overlaid with the commercial side, because whilst the lessee might be quite comfortable with variable lease payments and them not taking the risk, clearly the risk is somewhere, and it's then on the other party, so it's going to be part of that negotiation.
Right, Philip, Germany, they still like leases.
We do.
Do you find yourself forced into that kind of scenario in Germany?
Germany's one of our priority markets in Europe, and we've actually, my counterparts in Frankfurt are doing extremely well, having signed a record amount of new franchises last 3 years in a row. And our franchisees we've worked with our franchisees to enable them to actually sign lease contracts with developers, and so they can then franchise with us.
How are you working with them to what enthusiasm are you bringing?
So we are we've launched a few years ago something called Franchise Plus, which gives a bit more support to the franchisees in order for them to to support them with their signing their leases.
How supporting them? How?
It's mainly works with charging them incremental fees in order to give them support to put down rental deposits, effectively enabling them to grow faster, so they can put down more deposits to grow faster, develop more hotels, and sign more franchise with us. We work with a number of multi-development partners, and we tend to sign deals for sort of 10, 15 or 20 hotels. A number of those partners are now coming up to in the teens for the number of hotels that they have open or under development with us, and so the strategy is showing the fruits of its labour and proving very successful. We're recruiting a lot of new people to support those hotels, getting them open, and B, supporting them once they're open in our Frankfurt office. And I'd say that Germany's been a very strong success story for us in the last 3 years. 3 or 4 years.
Is there any clamouring for you to have more skin in the game? Do you think there should be more risk taken by the operators?
Listen, people always want to ask those questions of us, and it's fair that they should ask those questions. I think from our perspective, being a global business, you have to look at things globally, where you're growing fastest globally, where your opportunities are, where your priorities are, what your strategy is globally. Can you put too much emphasis in one particular market? I think the people who are looking at things from the global picture would rather you de-risk the situation and not do that too much. We haven't felt a need to yet, and so we haven't done that yet. So and I think that'll continue to be the case for the next few years.
Okay. As far as franchising over management or leases, you're not operating the property. Do you see a risk that you'll be seeing just as a logo above a hotel, and you'll be losing all the operational expertise, or do you still feed some of that into the hotels? Because isn't there a point where you become just distribution, and then a hotel thinks, maybe I'll just go with Expedia instead?
Well, I'm yet to see the first Expedia branded hotel, but I think from our perspective, we're a global brand. We own very few hotels, and we operate 800 of our 5,000 hotels. So we've got more hotels operated. More of our brands are operated by other people. Doesn't mean to say we lose our expertise, because we are the key driver to innovation and growth, which leads to growth and development. So we have a central support team dedicated to supporting and working with the franchisees, doing business review meetings, coaching, training. The amount of training that we offer online and in person is incredible for our franchisees. And so we are not just we're not just there in the background, collecting royalty fees. We're there enhancing franchisees to grow their revenues in order so we can grow our revenues. So there is a lot to be said to be providing training and support services for the hotels. And I think this is where IHG sets itself apart from the rest of the franchise community with the support network that we have, and the team that's centrally based. Not only have we got a sort of a call centre that all of the hotels can call up, there's also a field team who do the visits and performance review meetings with the hotels. So we've got a very good team of specialist support people, and it's also the innovations that we're rolling out, whether it's in design and like the open lobby, but also whether it's the Book Direct campaign. We were the first of the major brands to kick off the Book Direct campaign, and you'll see that we've been a history of being very innovative in the last since we started franchising, really.
It's true, we're looking forward to your new booking system. So I'm going to let you go in a second, but
Okay.
Are the days of the long-term management contract over? How long are your contracts typically?
No, I don't think so. I mean, our contracts are usually in excess of 20 years, and where
Is that for new contracts that you're signing now, or?
New contracts, renewals. Each contract is with a different partner, so there's different things that are important to that partner, and we'll discuss those things. But we generally, if we're going into this, it's a long-term game, and I don't think it does the hotel any favours when the hotel reflags every few years. So again, we're working in a long-term game. We want to work with like-minded people who have that long-term vision. and therefore we haven't really, we don't do short-term management contracts. I think the opportunity for the third-party management companies is in the short-term management contract business, where they're managing for an owner who has a franchise. That's a niche market for them, and an opportunity that they should be looking to expand in. I know the emergence of that of the third-party management contract is growing significantly. There's a lot of new players coming in, and I think again that's a testament to the brands as well, because a lot of those people that started those third-party management companies, they had their training with the big brands. So the brands do provide the support and the training, and then the entrepreneurial individuals go off to create great value by starting their own management companies and filling in the gaps where the brands don't necessarily want to do the short-term management, so they're happy to take that risk and do that themselves.
Max, you were nodding sagely, which is your first mistake. Management contracts, contracting, expanding.
I think the engagement between a developer, owner, brands has multiplied with different offerings. I see that continuing to grow. And I think you were kind of alluding to the franchise program being here's a book, off you go and run the hotel. But the franchise programs that we've talked to today, they're extensive programs, and they really are hands-on. It's not a guidebook. I don't generally believe most of those operators could manage the brand in any other way. Franchising it's kind of an alternative operator sector, if you like, and it fills the gaps, as Phil's alluded to, where the big brands don't want to be, or the quantum isn't quite right for their model. So yes, I think as I alluded to earlier, I think there's an opening at the moment, particularly in alternatives for lease opportunity. I think the alternatives are likely to see transfer into management and possibly ultimately franchise, but it's a long way off that, I think, in the current model.
David, expanding or contracting?
I'm sorry?
Management contracts.
Yeah.
Getting shorter, ever shorter?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on a lot of variables. The kind of luxury brands, the Four Seasons type brands tend to have longer management contracts than the more mid-range or budget end of the hotel market. It really depends on that and the perspective of the owner. If they want a long-term relationship, many luxury brand owners want have even asked for longer-term contracts up to 50, 80 years sometimes. But a typical owner's
80 years.
Yeah, there are some.
Who's asking for 80 years? That's like owning a parrot.
Yeah. and to be honest, I think there's diminishing financial returns from having something that long. But in most cases, owners will tend to want a shorter term contract than the operators will. The operators want the certainty of a long-term relationship. Owners are thinking a lot more about exit strategies, and to the extent they have a 20-year plus management contract, they'll want some kind of provision that allows termination in the event of sale of the hotel or some kind of relationship with that. Now, I think that's much more common now. There's some kind of provision that's granted for that. But it really depends on the exit strategy of the owner of the hotel. Sometimes operators too approach a new market with trepidation. They don't want a super long-term contract too if they don't think it's going to be necessarily financially successful. So really, it depends on the location, the brand, the owner, and the operator. Really, appetite for risk, the length of the contracts.
What about performance guarantees? I'm just going to do a quick survey of the room. If anyone's been involved in performance guarantees, has anyone ever seen any of them brought to bear? Hands up. No?
I've seen a lot of talking about them.
They are. It's nice to chat about them.
In the apart hotel sector, and I think probably Max would agree, sometimes where there's a lack of real understanding about it and there's a lot of goodwill around the table, there's often this discussion about base level rent guarantees, but normally it results in a straightforward lease with an apart hotel company. with a hotelier and a brand like IHD. I mean, with respect to everybody who's asking that question, what more guarantee do you need with such a credible brand and distribution?
Well, you can't just stick a holiday in Morton Hampstead and hope it goes okay.
No, but then I imagine IHD wouldn't get involved in that unless they've done their research on what they feel that they genuinely could achieve based on like for like
I think
variables.
what Ben's probably alluding to is obviously, we have a rigorous approval process when somebody comes to us applying for a franchise. It's not granted automatically, So we do a lot of homework on that, and we have to buy into it and believe in the business case for the hotel. And if we don't, we won't grant the franchise. So, I think there's from the guest perspective, they'll see the brand on the door. The guests may not understand what the ownership structure of the property is, and if they see that the hotel's in a bad condition or it's empty or it's closed down, they'll say, remember that holiday and that closed down. They won't say, remember Ben's hotel that closed down. And so, the brands have a lot. This is, I think, where owners and the advisors could be, they could actually appreciate the brand's position a bit more in this respect, because being the household name that the guests will know, we can't, when we've got all of these hotels around the world, the damage that one hotel could do to the brand is significant, and so we have to make sure that the brand is protected, and that's why we do have a rigorous approval process when we are granting franchises.
Isn't that's the risk that you take?
That's the risk that we take.
Rather
That's the business we're in, but we mitigate that risk by having a rigorous approval process. And we have structures in place once the hotel's open to check performance, to check quality standards, mystery shoppers, audits, etc. But that is our business model. So,
Max, do you agree?
Yeah, that's nothing to add there.
Brilliant. Where were we? Yes. Jason, how are you seeing management contracts? Longer, shorter, ever funner, more performance guarantees?
Well, I think, as I mentioned before, because we're such a new brand, and obviously trying to expand from this side of the pond. So obviously we have to make way for trying to get that traction that we want in those specific markets. So for us, yes, we want the perfect location for the brands that we have in question. But we'll assess that marketplace to ensure that we're coming in carefully, we're doing our due diligence, and vetting each and every step of the way for that market position of our brands, and also making sure that we're aligning with the owner's interest, because we're bringing such a unique product into the market that it's going to align properly. So that's equally important to us. But our management contracts typically run for about 15 to 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how are you competing with the big brands as far as the owners see you?
We're not in the space to compete with the big brands. That's not our space. We're pretty much in an upscale lifestyle, so we're not.
Ooh, they have upscale lifestyle.
No, absolutely.
things.
But
I've seen them.
They don't have the highly activated public areas that we supply, and I'm being very blunt here. No. I mean, just to give you an idea, I just came back from Berlin, and we sponsored the event for the first time, and I said to my boss, so what do you think? And he said, it's been great. We had none of the competitors here.
I don't know. The bar area in the Intercon in Berlin is a highly activated public area.
Only throughout the conference, yeah. But no, but I mean they're great brands. But I just think there's a slightly different twist to what we offer, and that's why we have to define the market carefully and where we want to be, and activating that local community around us. So we're slightly a little bit different.
I think it's fantastic that you're completely underestimating your competition.
It's quite a different story at Kimpton in the US, because a lot of those are repositioned into different brands now. It's another story.
So there's some friction here between the operators. David, how do you see friction between the owners and the operators at the moment? Happier, sadder? There was some mention of the direct booking process, which is currently underway, which is having a little bit of an impact, I'm sure IHG would agree, on money, what is coming in through the door. Owners are wondering why they're paying for it.
Yes. Well, shared costs are one of the areas of contention between owners and operators. Sometimes in management agreements there's a provision that costs can be shared between other hotels in the network come across, and many, I know some operators say that those will be done equitably, but actually what does that mean? And a lot of owners are unhappy if funds are taken from them that are not applied to their hotels. That's always a source of contention. Budgeting process is always a source of stress between owners and operators, and the more clear the process can be delineated in the management agreement, the better. And what happens if there's disagreement, and some practical way of resolving minor disputes over those types of things. And
how would you recommend doing that?
Just clear provisions, and maybe an expert to make a determination that you don't want to put out to arbitration or the courts, which could take years if you can get an agreed expert to make a determination on disputes in the budgeting process. Then there's always disputes over sale of the property, and the process for that are very common. If the hotel hotel owner wants to sell, so again, it's important to have clearly defined mutually agreeable provisions for what happens in the event if the owner wants to sell, because it is many owners just don't want to hold on to the property forever, and they don't want to, and they want either some kind of notice provision, or and many will agree to some kind of liquidated amount to be paid as long as it's clear and they know what they're going to have to pay up front, rather than having a negotiation with the owner when it comes to that.
As far as adding value to a property, do owners see it more in the management contract, more in the lease, or as far as you're saying, get grabbed off the quick?
With owners, again, it depends on the appetite for risk. With if it's an insurance company owner, they're going to want a lease, a fixed term lease. They're going to want a very little risk. More risk would be, if you're living along the scale, would be a variable kind of lease, and a hotel management contract for an owner is the highest risk, because they're bearing really the financial burden of the performance of the hotel if they don't have any kind of guarantees. So that's the kind of continuum of, and it depends on the appetite for risk. There's greater rewards if it's a successful hotel. If it's not a successful hotel, there's a bigger downside for having a management contract.
Jason, are you saying to your owners, fly us, get 20% more value?
No, I mean, obviously, we've got to be fairly careful in terms of how we position our brand. We're not here just to try and get traction as quickly as we can, and put owners on this pedestal to say, yes, our brand delivers this, we're going to do this. This is not the idea. We tend to align and work with the owners, so we want them to be in the same basket they were in. Obviously, not the day-to-day operations of the hotel, but just in thinking, so budgetary process, that we're thinking alike in terms of how we're going to market and find those new customer sources coming from different channels, and how do we keep ground floor space activated, because that's where we really generate the revenue. I mean, just to give you an idea, whereas most traditional hotel operators will come in 25-30% of total revenue, we're talking 44, 45, 50%, and we can show that we prove that we can do that. So for us, it's really important that we align, market the community, make sure that we keep that busy. So it's really drawing in the owner's interest to our interest, that there's a harmony between the two of us. Yeah.
Max, what sort of difference in valuation are you seeing with a management contract and a lease attached?
Geography has a big part to play, but if we just stick with London, it can be anything between 50 and 75 pips on the yield. Again, going back to what Dave was saying, very much about the profile of the investor. Insurance, domestic money at the moment is very lease supportive, and then as the risk profile changes, and appetite for, in theory, gaining VP through non-performing management agreements is probably more international as far as capital is concerned. But generally in London, I'd say between 50 and 75 bips. In the regions, it can vary, be wider than that, typically about 100 bips. But then if you some of the quieter towns, it'll be wider than that. Somewhere like Aberdeen right now is probably a bit wider than that.
Anyone any questions at this stage? No? Activated public areas? No activated public areas here. In that case, I shall return to picking on Philip. Guest data.
Yes.
Who owns the guest data? Guest data is what Expedia has,
Yeah.
it's what Google has, it's what you guys have. But some of the operators, not you specifically, have difficulty mining that to their advantage.
Well, we have in our contracts that we would own the guest data, simply because they're actually reward club loyal guests. They're booking through the IHG system.
But the owner pays into that system.
The owner's buying into the brand, and he knows what comes with that, which is the IHG, which is the IHG owns the data.
Good. David, should that be the case?
Well, it depends on if I'm acting for an owner or an operator. But certainly,
I love data.
but certainly, owners have a legitimate interest in having the information about their hotel guests, because the hotel manager, the operator may be gone one day, and the lease expires, and the operator decides to move on, and it seems unfair that this hotel owner should lose its all its access to the guests that have used its hotel facilities through the years. So I think that both the owner and the operator have a legitimate claim, and I think they should both have right to use the guest information. Of course, both will have to register with the relevant information commissioner office, and they will have to get permission from the guests that how their information can be used and for what purposes. But I think it's only fair that the owner as well as the operator should have use and ownership of the information, or if it is owned by the one or the other, there should be a perpetual license to the other to use that information.
So just one question. But if the guests arrive by virtue of the brand and then the brand leaves, what's to say that the guests want to hear from the owner without the brand?
Well, there's an argument that they came for that hotel, not for the brand. I mean, it may be you could argue either way. You could argue that the brand delivered it just because they wanted to stay at Hilton, or
locations,
or it's just because it's a beautiful property that they came to. So.
Of course, you could say that the people who own the data are actually the customers.
No.
Stupid.
No, because we're leaving the Europe, so it doesn't matter.
Under the GDPR, it won't make any difference. General data protection regulation will impose. It will come in anyway.
So what
so
are we?
You've got to comply with that, and so your customers can request to know what data you're holding on them, and they can request for it to be taken away. They can request what you're using it for. So, on IHG Rewards, for example, you need to be stating now, or in the future, what you're going to do with their data. So you need to be very careful as to what you're going to say you're going to do with it. And you need to make that easy to understand as well. It's going to be a nightmare.
David's nodding. Is it going to be a nightmare?
Well, yeah, it will strengthen. I mean, the GDPR imposes draconian penalties too for non-compliance, and allows for the first time the user to actually bring civil actions against the violations in the past. With the existing regime, it was just a fine from the ICO, which will also be bigger. I think it's a percentage of annual turnover. I can't remember what, but it's a substantial percentage of turnover. Fines can be from the ICO, but it also give the user whose data was improperly used the right to sue the operator.
What counts as improper use?
Oh, well, selling it, for example, to third parties without their permission, or anything outside the use that's been stated in either what they've signed up to, what they've consented to, or is in the data protection policy of the company, or anything outside of the uses that have been notified and agreed.
Jason, I'm going to stop picking on Philip for 10 seconds. I don't know anything about how you guys use data. Is this relevant to you?
Yeah, I mean for sure. I mean we comply to like every other brand. We want to own the data. That's nice. So obviously, I guess it's always a fighting war when obviously we're coming to work through the agreements that the owner wants the right to have that share that data as well. But we'll fight to protect it because obviously, yes, we understand that he's using his resources to promote us just the same. But equally, it's the brand that we need to protect, and obviously we're marketing to that base.
Right.
Yeah.
Philip, how do you see these changes affecting you? What's your kind of main use of data?
Well, I mean, from listening to what Will's just said, I think if I was an owner, I'd be a bit scared about all the trouble that I could be getting into. I'd probably want the brand to have the data listening to that because they have the resource to make sure everything's done correctly, and the owner, it's probably going to be not the thing that's the most forefront of his mind, and so with all these new regulations coming, which is all news to me at the minute, we'll have the team of however many people in our office making sure that big brands like ours are compliant, and so as an owner, I want to put my trust in the brand that they're looking after that for me, and I think I'd be quite happy to have the brand own the data.
Okay, and that would abdicate responsibility, David.
Yeah, to the extent the owner isn't using that information, that's fine. But again, it depends on the sophistication of the owner. Many hotels are owned by large groups that would have the sophistication and be able to deal with the compliance regulations. But I agree for a small individually owned hotel that might be daunting to comply with all the requirements of the GDPR. But at the same time, if you ask an owner if he wants to be able to have the guest lists, maintain them, I think most would say yes, they would.
Nick, we haven't heard from you for a while, so I'm going to pick on you from the very end. It's slightly niche, which may not be your area. Loyalty points, relevant to these guys here. How does that factor in with accounting? So there's a chap in the US now who's launched a loyalty point trading platform, and lots of the big airlines have raised money off the back of loyalty points before. Does that come into an accounting thing for you, and where does that play into the different contractual elements?
Yeah, well, you'd be glad to know there's another accounting change to deal with when dealing with loyalty points. So there's a new standard, IFRS 15, comes before the leasing standard actually, that looks at many different aspects of when you take your revenue. So earlier we were talking about brands and the use of a brand. IFRS 15 will impact the timing of those sort of elements as well, as to whether you've given them all the ability to use the brand on day one, or whether that's a continuing obligation you've got to keep the brand up to scratch and ongoing obligations. But that's not quite your question. Your question was around the loyalty points, and yes, the new standard does change some of the impacts for loyalty schemes. But in general, they are already being accounted for. So when you sell a hotel, a day's use of the hotel, you will be allocating effectively some of the revenue to the loyalty point that you get at that time. Maybe not that much, but some portion of it. That similar concept is still there in IFRS 15. It's just that the rules and the approach that you take to measuring that becomes just a little bit more complicated.
David, the huge round of consolidation that we're seeing at the moment in the sector. You'll notice I'm not picking on Philip and asking him when IHG is going to be sold, because surely this year. But well, I guess the Chinese can't get money out anymore, so maybe not. But as far as consolidation goes, is that driving an increase in franchises, an increase in soft brands, as people try to avoid cannibalisation and competition and territorial disputes?
Well, I certainly think it's going to lead to problems for the companies that have bought brands they've been competing with in terms of existing agreements that they have not to have a brand within that area. I would think that's going to be a nightmare. Marriott taking over Starwood and having Starwood hotels that are competing with Marriott's in places where they've got material restrictions in place. So I think that's certainly going to be one of the legal issues that's arising out of it.
What's the solution to that? To throw more brands at the issue, or?
Well, I think carve-outs probably in the agreement for things that can't be avoided, I suppose, and also carefully crafted territorial restrictions and agreements that talk about just certain brands, not brands that are required afterwards. Although I wouldn't get much assurance from an owner from that if the operator is free to buy, is not going to put its own brand in, but it's free to buy another brand that's across the road the following week. It will be certainly a discussion ongoing between operators and owners about that, and I would have thought it's going to decrease competition at that as well. Fewer brands out there. So.
But would these problems not have come to light already? I mean, Marriott, Starwood, it's not yesterday. It's a few months ago now. Surely we would have heard about a problem if it would have been a problem by now.
But certainly, but I mean, new. When a new owner wants to do a hotel with a territorial restriction, he'll find that there's 20 hotels rather than 10 now in the area that he wants to. So it's going to be trickier to get.
Well, Jason doesn't have any.
No, I'm stepping that space for sure.
Everyone to Jason. I know when Accor launched its marketplace model, which if anyone hasn't been following that fascinating scenario, it's unbranded hotels using Accor's distribution without having to be Accor flagged, which is forward thinking or crazy depending on how you look at it. It seems to be working out for them slowly at the moment, but there was a lot of letters were sent, I believe, from Accor owners to Accor saying, are you doing here? I seem to be competing with somebody down the road and they're not paying to have a shiny Ibis flag above them. So there have been issues, and I know Starwood Marriott, there have been some rumblings, but they've got 30 brands to choose from now and more on the way. So that's fine, we're not competing, it's all perfectly acceptable. Max, you're nodding again.
What was
Makes
that?
me think you want to speak.
No, I think on the consolidation piece, I think there's always going to be expansion, M&A, consolidation. I think my view is over the next 5 or 10 years we're likely to see particularly some of the bigger brands and some of the small brands working closely together, but I think it's probably more about consolidation across sectors or bringing sectors together. So I mean, conceptually, if you consider a city has got lots of rooms and it's sitting in residential, PRS, hospitality, and underneath hospitality you can sit service apartments, apart hotels, hostels. I would envisage seeing lots of the larger brands expanding their offering to be able to facilitate management of those rooms in different sectors. The principle of having someone in a room with a bed, whether they're for 1 year or one night, and whether they're the demographic of a 2, 3, 4, 5 star at a platform level. With technology today, that can be managed from one platform.
It is working for Airbnb, it's true.
Yeah, and just talking on a call with Adagio on one fine day, it's already beginning to happen. I think from a consumer perspective, one house with different experiences is a concept that's already there. It's just how wide can that go, and how much that brand wants to catch that consumer along their life journey.
Well, Accor wants to be able to take your dry cleaning in, don't they? And you can pick that up.
Yeah.
That's their new thing. And Conquest their community vertical. You can drop your, I think they were using the example of a slightly deranged elderly relative, which you could leave in the hotel, and an Accor employee would take them to a train station for you. It's a true story. With them here now. David, with all the consolidation going on at the moment, we're seeing a lot of the rise of the US, obviously Marriott, Starwood. Is the US or UK management contract law the one that we should be favouring, or the one that we'll have imposed on us?
I'm of different minds with using US or UK law with management contracts. It really depends on the circumstances and the jurisdiction. I mean, there's a strong argument that if you're going into a place, maybe use the Philippines as an example, that you won't necessarily have the best and most fair treatment from local courts, and there may be a local bias, in which case you'd want to favor a more familiar and Western jurisdiction for your choice of law and choice of dispute resolution. On the other hand, if you're thinking about trying to enforce any judgment you get, you'll eventually have to go back to that jurisdiction, and if you have a UK or US judgment, you'll have to go back there and go through their courts again to get it enforced. So in some cases where you have, because there's no reciprocal enforcement of judgments outside of the EU, there's no universal convention that allows enforcement of judgments, universally for court judgments. Often, if you want to use a Western country, US or the UK, as your choice of law and jurisdiction, it's better to have arbitration, because there is an arbitration clause, because that arbitration judgments are universally enforceable pretty much worldwide. There's an international convention that does that. So it really depends on if you have trust in the local courts, if you think it's a fair kind of country. If it's in the EU, you should feel more comfortable, I think, with local courts. If it's a developing nation where there is more corruption and bias, you might think about using UK or US law.
So best avoid corruption, people. As we're coming towards the end, does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Peter G from Leisure Dreams. Coming back on the accounting standards, it seems the new accounting standards will be very onerous on leases. But can you not get the same effect by having a management contract with guarantee and adjusting the terms to end up with exactly the same balance
Yes, I think so.
and not have the disclosure requirements?
The accounting standards look at any arrangement, so it doesn't have to say it's a lease. It can be any arrangement, and it looks to whether you are using a specified asset, that's the word in the standard. And of course, if you're talking about a particular property in a particular location, and you get to use that property for that period of time, that could also be a lease. At the moment, that judgment isn't terribly important because whatever you do, whether you're saying you're getting a service for the use of the property or whether it's a lease, at the moment, assuming they're operating leases, buildings have long lives and you've maybe got a 20-year lease, that's just going to be accounted for as an annual payment. It doesn't really matter. Suddenly, with a new leasing standard, we've got a different measure. So something which is a service is going to be treated fundamentally differently to something which is a lease. The lease is going to come on your balance sheet, and 20 years of use of an asset of the hotel is going to be a big number to come on your balance sheet. So yes, you can get it, and it will need that assessment that in theory has been done before to decide whether it was a lease, but it wasn't a very important an assessment before. In the past, it was just a disclosure requirement, a disclosure as to whether you had the leases or not. Now it will be, does it come on your balance sheet?
But with a guarantee, can actually protect the income that you would get under a lease?
Yes. So you're talking about the operator here. So So I think if you are making use of the building and you're guaranteeing to pay a certain amount to the owner, then that sounds like the use of that property for a period of time, and it's that property, so that would make it potentially a lease.
So one question just for Max then. So in light of these rules, how do you see the apartment hotel sector developing, given the fact that it's heavier, it's more prevalent for operators to take leases because they want to, and because they're inclined to, and maybe because they're forced to, because there isn't that belief in the management contract for an apartment hotel company just yet. But where do you see that developing, given the fact that the risk will be all on the operator?
I mean, leases at an operational level are expensive with SDLT and from an accounting perspective. That being said, I mean, at JLL last year and this year, we've run some processes on towers of 150, 200 rooms and had substantial offers coming in. I think the question Peter was alluding to is, can it be circumnavigated, choice of words, by having a management agreement with a low threshold and top-up payment to avoid having a balance sheet impact with a lease number, and avoiding or circumnavigating the SDLT payment because it's actually a management agreement with a base threshold. We have transacted on one of those that has gone down that route. I think if it is a window that is circumnavigating, I'd imagine that will come to an end fairly shortly. But it has an impact. It's I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's from an operating level, the impact on your business is significant. It's just for me, it's a balance about location, affordability, and ultimately it probably impacts the rent payment.
So it just feels, so just expand on that a bit more, it feels to me then the future looks brighter for the bigger brands than it does for the homegrown national SMEs, which traditionally always took leases, because there will be more risk averse, and they will be concerned more about having these leases on their balance sheet.
No, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I think some of the larger brands in the community have a significant distribution system. I think as an owner and investor, if you want that protection, and it affects your pricing on the building because you'll move out, but your cash flows will be stronger. So it's very much investor owner relevant. It'll be about the appetite of that asset owner.
Philip, so can I just understand a bit of a geeky question? So you've got a 20-year lease, right? The liability then is 20 times the lease payment. Is that right, or is it NPV?
Yep.
So there's no net present value.
No, it does take into it. It's effectively saying what's the value of that building you've got
So
for the 20 years. So there is a time value of money.
For the operator. The liability for the operator, there'll be a net present value of the lease payments. Is that right?
Correct.
And is there a corresponding asset?
Yes. So
How do you calculate it?
so at the outset is normally set to be equal. So it's very much like a finance lease. So at the moment, if you finance lease a car, it's your car and you've got the loan on your balance sheet, and
right.
normally at the outset.
So it's a balance. The impacts on the shareholder value is zero.
So not quite. It's a bit more complicated because whilst you've got those two things going on your balance sheet, and it's the same number on day one, you haven't lost out money immediately at that stage. The profit and loss impact and how that's going to affect your accounts going forward is going to look very different. So imagine you have a 20-year lease at the moment. You're going to have equal lease payments in your operating expenses, all your lease payments for the next 20 years, same amount. With you bring it on the balance sheet, what you're going to do is bring it on the balance sheet, but you're going to bring on a loan as well. So your ongoing charges are going to be amortisation of this asset that you brought on, the asset, the 20-year use, that's probably straight line. But your interest charge, the interest on the loan, is firstly not going to be in operating expenses, it's going to be down in your interest line, and it's going to be much bigger in the first years of the lease than the later years of the lease. So the timing of that makes a difference. And if you take a 20-year lease rather than two 10-year leases, it affects your balance sheets, but it also may well affect the timings of the actual profit and loss impacts.
But the EBITDA will, 5 years down the track, the EBITDA will be higher than it would otherwise be because the interest component is less.
So yeah, the impacts are a bit varied, but the EBITDA, which is obviously excluding the interest payments now, you've taken some of your lease payments and pulled a portion of it down into the interest line, so it's going to have an impact on how that's allocated.
More for any more?
Hi, Paul McSherry of Leisure Property Advisory. Just make a couple of points in the question around the data world. I spent 7 years back in the day working in consumer information and data. The hotel industry is seeing some problems, which for the flags, for example, I just want to make the point of, if you're an owner, and I work with owners and I work with hotel brands, you absolutely want the hotel brand to take on the owner's task now of how to manage it and not fall down the cracks. Also, your data over time, if you're talking about 10, 15, 20-year leases, your data over 10 years is already out of date. So the value to the owner, that's a completely different business. So I would urge anyone on the owner side to say, unless you've got something really quite whiz-bang and you've got a whole team to support the data world, give it to the owners and for the flags, should I say. And for the flags, that should be actually a great new tool now. Work it, flip it on its head and say, we'll take care of that. The second point is I've spoken with a couple of startup platforms who are going to come into the what I call it soft brand space, if you will, challenging the SLHs and that sort of world. And they're very clear that the new world apparently is all about experiential. So they're saying, forget points, give the person on arrival or do something for them that amazes them and warms them back to you. Now, admittedly, that's nothing new, but they're very firm in that thinking.
Isn't that also a function of the complicated loyalty programs that we have at the moment?
It is a function of that, but moreover, and it's a question to the panel, is do they see what is the problem with unused points on the balance sheet? Because this is their tactic to say, you don't have that problem, you don't have that underlying, possibly a ticking bomb, I don't know. But my question then to the panel is, what kind of issues do they have with unused loyalty points?
I think it might come right. Are you talking about if the guest? You're talking about if I've got a loyalty card and I've got 100,000 points
Sitting there
unused.
Use it any time you like.
I think the way that the hotels deal with this is that they have to make rooms available. Being part of the buying into the program, you have to have a certain number of rooms available for guests to redeem their points. So I think the hotels are they can have certain blackout dates if they need to, but I honestly, the hotels have to have the hotels limit. You can't have a 100-bedroom hotel that's got 100 people staying on loyalty points. So I don't think it has an impact on the hotel like you think it might. That it's because you limit the number of nights that can be used at the same time through the loyalty program redemptions. So I don't see it as a big issue.
It becomes an issue if that, heaven forfend, hotel company then goes bust, doesn't it? Because the loyalty points live on in some scenarios if you're linked to Amex or whatever, and then...
Well, I guess it's the same as if you buy a Woolworths, like we're talking about on the radio, they're talking about Woolworths being 10 years since Woolworths went bust, or if you had a Woolworths card, gift card for your birthday or whatever, and they went bust, then I think there's certain protections that David might be better placed to answer these kind of questions than me.
Well, it really, if they've gone bust, it really depends on what the arrangement was with creditors and how the liabilities are going to be dealt with. If it was just extinguished in the insolvency process, it wouldn't have any value anymore. And I suppose the same with a loyalty program. If it's a liability of the company and through the insolvency process, that's been extinguished. It's no longer there. There could be arrangements made though for honouring them in some way with the remaining assets of the company.
Just one more question on leases. Historical leases that were taken, 25-year leases that were taken last year, do they then go on to the balance sheet in 2019?
They do, I'm afraid. Yep. So there are some quite complex transition rules, but in principle, everything you've got there is reset. Everything's going on.
No
balance sheet. So no, it's not. Don't have to look backwards. So contracts you're signing today, leases you're signing today will come on balance sheet in 2019. So there's no way around that. But actually, there is some real impacts of the choices, because the question is, I'm halfway through a lease, well, what number am I bringing on halfway through? And some of the factors like discount rates and what you're valuing that at the time you bring it on can fundamentally change what your profit and loss account is. So if leases is a big issue for you because you've got a lot of leases and bringing it on is going to make a difference, the transition options that you choose will change what your impact going forward in profit and loss will be. So we're certainly talking to retailers in the same space, retailers with lots of property stores. This is a big issue for them, makes huge differences to the value and their profit and loss going forward. And for hotel chains or operators who do lease a lot of properties, it will have the same impact.
Sorry, can I just add to the boring accounting stuff?
Yeah, exactly. So we got to.
It's very easy to sit here and think that's just boring accounting stuff.
No, I come from a family of
but when
accountants.
you think about like, your balance sheet changing, your profit and loss account changing, think about the impact that will have on covenant testing should you have borrowings from lenders, etc. So there are a whole heap of commercial impacts which will flow from the boring accounting stuff in 2019.
I defend it, it's not entirely boring, but the other interesting factor, of course, is none of this changes the cash flows involved, but there's still discussions with how investors will see the balances that you've got on at the moment, which they may well be multiplying your operating lease commitments and trying to work out what they think the number is, what the equivalent loan that you've got is. And when you come up with a different number when it comes into the balance sheet, that can have an impact on the actual what the perceived value is.
I'm allowed to say that, someone at the KPMG person.
I see salted throughout the crowd.
This would be so interesting.
And it was. Any more interesting accountancy questions or other? No, in that case, I'd like to you to join me in thanking the panel and also in apologising to Philip.
Thank you, Catherine.